Messerschmitt Bf 109. The story of Germany's air war doesn't really begin without the Messerschmitt Bf 109. This aircraft wasn't just another fighter sitting on an airfield. It was everywhere. From the opening shots of the war in 1939 to the final desperate days in 1945, the Bf 109 remained a constant presence in the skies. What made it so effective wasn't just speed or firepower, it was adaptability. The design kept evolving, shifting with the needs of the war. Early variants were nimble and aggressive, perfect for fast-moving campaigns across Europe. Later versions became more powerful, heavier, and more specialized, trying to keep up with increasingly capable Allied aircraft. Pilots often described it as a machine that demanded respect. It wasn't the easiest aircraft to handle, especially during takeoff and landing, but in the air it delivered. Tight turns, strong climb rates, and solid armament made it a dangerous opponent. And then there's the sheer scale. Thousands were built, countless missions were flown. It wasn't flashy in the way some later aircraft would be, but it didn't need to be. The Bf 109 earned its place through consistency. It showed up, did its job, and kept going. In many ways, it became the face of the Luftwaffe fighter force, not because it was perfect, but because it was always there when it mattered. Focke-Wulf FW-190. If the Bf 109 was the backbone, the Focke-Wulf FW-190 was the muscle. When this aircraft entered service, it immediately changed the dynamic in the air. Allied pilots quickly realized they were dealing with something different. The FW-190 wasn't just fast, it was brutally effective. Its radial engine gave it a rugged edge, allowing it to absorb damage and keep flying in situations where other aircraft might fail. There was a certain aggression built into its design. It could dive hard, roll quickly, and hit targets with serious firepower. That combination made it especially dangerous in close combat. But what really set it apart was versatility. This wasn't just a fighter. It adapted into multiple roles: interceptor, ground attack aircraft, even fighter bomber. It could switch from air combat to striking ground targets without losing effectiveness. Pilots appreciated how responsive it felt. Compared to the Bf 109, it was often considered more forgiving, especially at lower altitudes. That made it a favorite among many who flew it. The nickname Butcher Bird wasn't given lightly. It reflected the aircraft's reputation: fast, lethal, and relentless. Messerschmitt Me-262. Then everything changed. The Messerschmitt Me-262 didn't just improve on existing designs, it rewrote the rules entirely. This was the world's first operational jet fighter, and once it appeared, the gap between it and traditional aircraft was impossible to ignore. Speed became its defining feature. Allied pilots flying piston-engine fighters suddenly found themselves facing something they could barely catch, let alone engage effectively. The Me-262 could appear, strike, and disappear before a proper response could even form. But speed alone wasn't the whole story. It also carried heavy armament, making it devastating against bomber formations. A single pass could cause serious damage. Despite all that potential, the aircraft came with challenges. Early jet engines weren't exactly reliable, and maintaining them was difficult, especially as the war situation worsened. Fuel shortages, pilot training issues, and logistical problems all limited its impact. Still, the Me-262 represented something bigger than just another aircraft. It was a glimpse into the future of aviation. Even in limited numbers, it proved that jet-powered combat wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Bombers and attack aircraft. Junkers Ju-87 Stuka. Few aircraft made an impression quite like the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka. It wasn't the fastest, and it certainly wasn't the most advanced, but it had something else: psychological impact. As it dove toward its target, that infamous siren would scream through the air. It wasn't just noise, it was intimidation. Troops on the ground knew exactly what was coming, and there was very little time to react. The Stuka was built for precision. Dive bombing allowed it to hit targets with remarkable accuracy, especially during the early stages of the war, when air superiority made those attacks possible. But that effectiveness came with a cost. The aircraft was vulnerable. Without fighter protection, it struggled against enemy aircraft. As the war progressed and opposition grew stronger, its limitations became more obvious. Even so, it continued to play a role. In situations where conditions allowed, it remained a reliable ground attack platform. It wasn't about speed or survivability, it was about delivering a strike exactly where it needed to go. Heinkel HE-111. The Heinkel He-111 carried a very different presence. Where the Stuka was loud and aggressive, the He-111 was steady and methodical. One of its most recognizable features was that distinctive glass nose. It gave the aircraft a unique look, but it also served a purpose, offering improved visibility for the crew. This bomber became one of the mainstays of German bombing operations, especially in the early years. It could carry a significant payload and operate across a range of missions. Over time, its role evolved. As defenses improved and newer aircraft entered the battlefield, the He-111 had to adapt. It took on additional duties, including transport and even launching V-1 flying bombs later in the war. It wasn't the most advanced bomber by the end, but reliability kept it relevant. It stayed in service longer than many expected, proving that sometimes consistency matters just as much as innovation. Junkers Ju-88. If one aircraft truly defined versatility, it was the Junkers Ju-88. Calling it just a bomber doesn't really do it justice. This aircraft could do almost everything. Level bombing, dive bombing, reconnaissance, night fighting, torpedo attacks. The Ju-88 handled it all. That flexibility made it one of the most valuable assets in the German arsenal. It also had the performance to back it up. Fast for its class and capable of adapting to different mission profiles, it could respond to changing battlefield conditions more effectively than many specialized aircraft. Crews often found themselves flying completely different types of missions depending on the situation. One day it might be a bombing run, the next a reconnaissance flight. That adaptability is what kept the Ju-88 relevant throughout the war. It wasn't just one thing, it was many things, all built into a single airframe. Transport and utility aircraft. Junkers Ju-52. The Junkers Ju-52 didn't have the sleek lines of a fighter or the imposing presence of a bomber, but it played a role just as important. This aircraft was the backbone of German transport operations. Supplies, troops, equipment, it carried everything. Wherever the war went, the Ju-52 followed. Its tri-motor design gave it reliability, especially in difficult conditions. It wasn't fast, but it didn't need to be. What mattered was that it could get the job done consistently. From airborne operations to supply missions in harsh environments, it proved its value over and over again. Even in situations where conditions were far from ideal, it kept flying. The nickname Ant Ju reflected a certain familiarity. It wasn't glamorous, but it was dependable. A machine crews could trust. Messerschmitt Me-323 Gigant. Then there was the Me-323, and everything about it felt oversized. This wasn't just a transport aircraft, it was a flying giant. Designed to carry massive loads, including vehicles and heavy equipment, it pushed the limits of what was possible at the time. 6 engines powered this enormous machine, but even with that, it wasn't exactly quick. Speed wasn't its strength, capacity was, and that came with risks. Its size made it an easy target, especially without proper escort. When intercepted, it had very little chance to defend itself effectively. Still, the concept behind it was ambitious. Moving large amounts of equipment quickly across distances was a major logistical challenge, and the Me-323 was an attempt to solve that problem in a bold way. Fiesler F-156 Storch. The Fiesler F, a 156 Storch operated on a completely different level. Low, slow, and incredibly precise. This aircraft could take off and land in spaces that seemed almost impossible. Short fields, rough terrain, confined areas. It handled them all with ease. Its design focused on control rather than speed. High lift wings and specialized landing gear allowed it to operate where other aircraft simply couldn't. That made it invaluable for communication, reconnaissance, in transporting personnel in challenging environments. It could reach locations that were otherwise inaccessible. Watching it operate almost felt unreal at times. It could appear to hover, maneuvering slowly and deliberately, as if ignoring the usual rules of flight. Focke-Wulf FW-189. The Focke-Wulf FW-189 didn't rely on speed or heavy firepower to stand out. Instead, it focused on something far more valuable in wartime: vision. Nicknamed the Flying Eye, this aircraft was built around visibility. Its twin-boom design and heavily glazed central cockpit gave the crew an almost uninterrupted view of the battlefield below. That kind of awareness changed everything during reconnaissance missions. Rather than rushing in and out, the FW-189 could carefully observe troop movements, track enemy positions, and relay critical information. It turned reconnaissance into something precise and controlled rather than rushed and risky. Pilots often found it surprisingly agile for its role. That maneuverability, combined with its visibility, made it difficult to intercept in certain situations. It could weave through danger while continuing to gather intelligence. It wasn't about domination, it was about awareness. And in war, knowing what's happening can be just as powerful as any weapon. Blohm & Voss Bf 138. Out over the vast stretches of the Atlantic, the Blohm & Voss Bv 138 carved out its role. This wasn't an aircraft designed for quick strikes or dramatic dogfights. It was built for endurance. With its distinctive shape, often compared to something unconventional, the Bv 138 prioritized function over appearance. It was a flying boat, capable of operating far from traditional airfields, using open water as its runway. Its mission was long-range patrol, searching for ships, tracking convoys, and monitoring vast ocean areas required patience and reliability. This aircraft delivered both. Conditions out at sea were rarely forgiving. Strong winds, rough waters, and long hours tested both the machine and its crew. Yet the Bv 138 kept operating, proving its durability again and again. It became a key part of maritime operations, extending the reach of surveillance far beyond what land-based aircraft could achieve. Arado AR-234, Recon. Speed changes everything, and the Arado AR-234 brought speed to reconnaissance in a way that hadn't been seen before. This wasn't just fast, it was jet fast. At a time when most aircraft still relied on piston engines, the AR-234 introduced a completely different level of performance. For reconnaissance missions, that meant one thing: near immunity. Intercepting it was incredibly difficult. By the time enemy fighters reacted, it was already gone. It could fly deep into contested areas, capture critical imagery, and return without engaging in combat. That made it an invaluable intelligence asset, especially in the later stages of the war. There was a certain confidence built into its missions, not because it was heavily armed, but because it didn't need to be. Speed became its defense.